Have you ever wondered what happens in a hospital morgue after midnight? What if the dead don't always stay still? Some nights the air turns thick with whispers, shadows move without reason, and something unseen watches from the corners. Hospitals are places of life and death, but the morgue, the coldest, quietest part of the building, is where the real nightmares unfold. Night shift workers speak of eerie encounters, unexplainable noises, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. I worked the night shift in a hospital for years, and what I experienced still haunts me. If you think ghosts aren't real, let me take you deep into the shadows of the morgue, where the dead don't always rest in peace. The first encounter, the first time I experienced something in the morgue, I was new to the night shift. I had always been skeptical of ghost stories, brushing them off as tricks of exhaustion or imagination. But one night, while I was alone in the basement level, I heard it. The sound of metal scraping against the cold tiles. I turned, my flashlight trembling in my hands. One of the body drawers had slid open slightly. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat. No one else was supposed to be here. Then came the whisper, a raspy, guttural voice that sent ice through my veins. "Help me!" My feet refused to move. My body refused to breathe. The drawer opened a little wider, the darkness within yawning like an abyss. I mustered the courage to step closer and slammed it shut, locking it before running out of the room. A few months later, I had almost convinced myself that what I had heard was my imagination. Then came another night. I was doing routine paperwork in the small office near the morgue when the lights flickered. It wasn't unusual. Old hospitals had faulty wiring. But then the temperature dropped, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes your breath visible. I heard the creak of the freezer doors. Turning toward the sound, I saw it. A shadow, darker than the already dimly lit corridor, standing motionless near the entrance. My mind screamed at me to move, but my body locked up as the figure took a slow step forward. The air thickened with the scent of rot, and then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the shadow vanished. One of the older nurses, who had been working there for decades, told me about the morgue's most infamous story. Years ago, a patient had been pronounced dead and taken to the morgue. Hours later, a janitor heard knocking from inside one of the drawers. Thinking it was a mistake, he rushed to get help, but when they opened the drawer, it was empty. The body had vanished. Since then, workers reported hearing soft knocks on the metal drawers, especially late at night. Some even claimed to see a figure wandering the hallways, searching, always searching. One night, a new nurse, Daniel, had been assigned morgue duty for the first time. I warned him that the basement level could be unsettling, but he laughed it off. A few hours into his shift, he burst into the break room, pale and shaking. "Did you hear that?" he asked frantically. Someone was screaming from inside a body bag. We rushed to the morgue together. The air was colder than usual. The screaming had stopped, but the sound of muffled sobbing echoed through the room. Daniel, braver than I, reached for the bag that had been twitching. He hesitated, then slowly unzipped it. Inside was the lifeless corpse of an elderly man, mouth frozen mid-scream. His hands, unnaturally stiff, were clawed against his own chest as if he had been buried alive. There was a rumor among the staff about a ghostly nurse who roamed the hospital at night. Some claimed she had been a real nurse, killed in a tragic accident decades ago. One night, while making my rounds, I caught a glimpse of someone down the hallway, a woman in an outdated nurse's uniform. Thinking it was a lost visitor, I called out, but she didn't respond. She turned the corner, and when I hurried after her, she was gone. I checked the security cameras later that night. The footage showed me walking toward the hallway, calling out, but there was no woman. I had been talking to nothing. The worst encounter came on my last shift before I quit the hospital. I was doing my rounds when I heard something strange, a soft, dragging sound, like something heavy scraping against the tiles. I turned the corner and stopped dead. One of the body bags on the autopsy table was moving. It shifted slightly, as if something inside was struggling to get out. My hands shook as I reached for my radio, but before I could call for help, the bag stopped moving. The entire room fell silent. Then the zipper slowly began to slide down, on its own. I ran. I didn't look back. I left my badge, my locker key, and everything behind. That was the last night I worked in that hospital. Even after I left, nightmares plagued me. In my dreams, I was back in the morgue, hearing whispers just beyond my vision. Sometimes I would wake up to the feeling of cold fingers brushing against my skin, only to find nothing there. A few months later, I met up with Daniel, the nurse who had heard the screaming corpse. He had also quit, unable to shake the feeling that something had followed him home. "Sometimes," he whispered, I see a shadow at the foot of my bed, and I swear, it's watching me. Hospitals hold more than just the living. They are filled with echoes of those who never truly left. If you ever find yourself alone in a morgue at night and you hear a whisper or a soft knock, don't turn around, because sometimes the dead aren't ready to say goodbye.